Hello, and today I'm going to go over with you your Unit 2 review, the cell structure and cell function. Please follow along on your Unit 2 review found on page 46 in your interactive science notebook, and make sure you are writing your answers on a blank sheet of paper so that you can take that home and study with you. So let's begin. So this is a little bit of a review of the cell theory timeline. If you remember a few weeks back, you had to create the timeline yourself. So it all began with Zacharias Janssen, who produced the first compound microscope. And then Robert Hooke, he was the first to call spaces in quark cells. So when he looked under the microscope, Robert Hooke looked and he saw these little spaces and he called those little quark cells. Then in the 1680s, Antoine van Leeuwenhoek observed living cells through a simple microscope. And he looked around and he saw these little things called animalcules because he saw these little things moving. So at that moment, we discover that all living things are, the basic unit of life is cells, is the main thing you notice at this time. From there, in 1838, Matthias Schleiden discovered that plants are made of cells. And then 1 year later, Theodore Schwann, remember Schwann sounds like swan, helped to discover that animals are made of cells. So at that point, we have two components of our cell theory. We have that cells are the basic unit of life and that plant animals, so all living things are made of cells. And then finally in 1855, Rudolf Virchow, he was able to discover that all cells come from pre-existing cells. So that should help you answer 1 through 5 on your review sheet. So the first person to observe living things he called animalcules would be Antoine Leeuwenhoek, who proposed the idea that every living cell comes from another living cell would be Rudolf Virchow, who proposed the idea that cells are the basic unit of life in animals would be Theodore Schwann. Then we have who proposed the idea that cells are the basic unit of life in plants, and that is going to be Matthias Schleiden. And then 5, who used a microscope that he designed to study a thin slice of quark that he coined the term cells because they look like little chambers. That is Robert Hooke. So moving on to number 6. Number 6 asks you, what are the 3 parts of cell theory? You will need to know this for your test, and they are what we just talked about. All living things are composed of cells. Cells are the basic units of structure and function in living things, which include animals and plants. And finally, all cells are produced from other cells. Now we're going to go over about organelles. So we've talked about cell theory and who discovered those. And now we're going to talk about the organelles. Okay, so this is going to help you answer 7 through 19 on your review. So let's talk about those. I have a lot of them up on the screen right now to help you remember. So which type of cell contains ribosomes? You simply can circle which one, and the answer is both prokaryotes and eukaryotic cells. All cells contain ribosomes, and ribosomes produce protein. Number 8. Which type of cell contains a membrane-bound nucleus? Remember, this is the big thing that is between, that tells us the difference between a prokaryotic and a eukaryotic. Pro do no nucleus. Eukaryotic do have a nucleus. So the answer is eukaryote. Number 9, which category of cells contains plant and animal cells? Because plant and animal cells both have a nucleus, they are eukaryote cells. 10, which organelle acts as a protective barrier or wall around the cell? This is going to be, and this protective barrier or wall would be a cell wall in plant cells. Number 11, which organelle acts as a power plant of the cell and it is in charge of converting energy? Remember I said it's like the flaming hot Cheeto. It is the mitochondria. Okay, it it converts the chemical energy, glucose, into ATP and cellular energy that can be used. 12, which organelle acts as a storage area of the cell? This is larger in plants. Okay, this is going to be the vacuoles. Animal cells have vacuoles, however, they're smaller or sometimes not there. Plants have a large vacuole to store their nutrients and water. Which organelle is found only in plant cells and provides protection and support? This is the cell wall. So if we go back up to number 10, the answer for a protective barrier would be a cell membrane, and the wall is the cell wall. The protective barrier, the cell membrane, is going to be found in all cells. The cell wall is only found in plant cells. 14, which organelle stored the DNA and is often referred to as the control center? This is the nucleus. The nucleus has the DNA and is in charge. It is found in animal and plant cells because it's found in all eukaryotes. 15, which organelle helps the cell keep its shape? That's going to be the cell membrane in animal and plants. The cell wall in plant cells also helps with that. 16, which organelle controls the movement of materials in and out of cell? That is also the cell membrane. That is what it's in charge of. And then 17 asks, name 2 organelles you can find in plant cells and not in animal cells. This is a big thing that will be asked on the test, so you need to know this, that the 2 organelles that are found in plant cells that are not found in animal cells are chloroplast and the cell wall. Animals don't have that because animals can get their food or their nutrients, their sugar, from other sources. Plants have to use the chloroplast to convert the sunlight, carbon dioxide, and water into glucose. So that leads us right into number 18, which organelle converts energy from the sun into sugar? And the answer to that is chloroplast, and that is only found in plant cells. So if we look up at this chart, you see that has cell membrane. Okay, we have the cell wall, the nucleus, cytoplasm, mitochondria, chloroplast, vacuole, and lysosome. You don't have to know about lysosome, but do know the cell membrane is the outer boundary. It helps things get in and out of the cell, and it protects the cell. It's found in both plant animals. Cell wall, it is rigid. It is only found in plant cells, and it helps to provide support and protection. The nucleus houses chromosomes and the DNA, and it's in control. The cytoplasm is the gel-like area that fills the cell. The mitochondria converts chemical energy into energy that the cell can use. The chloroplast is the site of photosynthesis. It's only in plant cells, and the vacuole stores the water and nutrients. It's very large and central in plant, and it's small or maybe even absent in animal. So number 19 asks you, what are the 8 characteristics of life? I recommend you go back to this foldable that is in your interactive notebook. So just to review, all living things pass on genetic information in the form of DNA. They grow and develop. They also have the ability to respond to stimuli. They can reproduce. They have the ability to maintain homeostasis, which is a stable internal environment. They either convert or create energy. They are made up of cells, and finally, they can evolve and adapt. And then 20 asks you, what is the organization of life from smallest to largest? Okay, and to provide an example of each. So we have an atom to molecule to organelle to cell to tissue to organ system and organism. We went over and provided an example during our stations that we did, but just to review, an atom, an example would be carbon, oxygen, or hydrogen. A molecule would be H2O or water, or even carbon dioxide, CO2. An organelle, you can do any of the organelles we talked about, mitochondria, nucleus, chloroplast. Then we have a cell, animal cell, plant cell, prokaryote cell. When cells work together for a similar function or job, it becomes a tissue. So like a muscle tissue. When the tissues work together, they create an organ. And when organs do the similar job, they become an organ system. And then all organisms are made up of multiple organ systems. An organism can live on its own. Finally, you are to label the cells on your worksheet. Okay, do the best you can, refer to the stations. You should know these. We've been going over this a lot. And finally, if you are in advanced, the main thing you need to know about the cell membrane is that passive transport, so moving things through the cell membrane in passive transport does not require energy. It's relaxed, it doesn't need it. But in active transport, it needs energy. To be active needs energy. You need to know, remember those two things. Passive, no energy, active, energy. And then I'm just going to go over a little bit more in depth about the test. It is all multiple choice, and it ranges depending on the class you're in from 20 to 25 questions. You will need to know the difference between prokaryote and eukaryote cell, knowing that pro, no nucleus, a eukaryote does have a nucleus. Know that the role of the nucleus is beyond being the control center, it also stores our DNA. Mitochondria converts that chemical energy for the cell to use. And like I said earlier, it's very important for you to remember that plant cells, in addition to having similar organelles as animal cells, have also chloroplast and cell walls. Cell walls protect and support the cell, and that cell walls are also found in plant and prokaryote cells. You will need to know the 3 parts of cell theory. So you know that all living things are made up of cells, and cells come from pre-existing cells, and that cells are the basic unit of life. Hooke and Leeuwenhoek discovered that cells are the basic unit of life. Know that homeostasis, it's what we did on that Gizmo lab on the iPads during the stations. It is when an organism maintains a stable internal environment. Like when she was on that treadmill, you had to give her water because she was losing too much liquid. You had to cool her down because she was warming up too much inside. So it's what organisms do to maintain a stable internal environment. The cell membrane as an organism, or as an organelle, separates the cell from the outside environment. Chloroplasts carry out photosynthesis in plants. And when organs work together, it is an organ system. Remember, atoms to molecules, to cells, to tissues, to organ system, to organisms. When a group of cells work together and have the same function, it is a tissue. And then finally, characteristic of life, they also include responding to stimuli, having DNA genetic material, and using energy. Please study. This is on YouTube. You can continue to watch it before the test. Use it to answer your questions and go back and pause it. Do whatever you need to make sure that you are ready for this test. And I will see you soon.